everyone, Drizzerey here, and welcome to another time-lapse video. Before I get started on the topic of this video, I just wanted to say, in light of current events, I am absolutely disgusted with how we are treating our own people, and I stand with the protesters. I will have link down in the description below on how you can support them, and I highly encourage everyone to go check out Lavender Town's recent video on our 5 amendments and why I am disgusted that all of these rights are being infringed upon by our own police force that are supposed to, uphold our laws, which include those amendments. I'll leave it at that. I have been having a very difficult time, and if you notice a complete tonal shift, that's because I had to stop the recording to recenter myself so that I can speak a bit more normally, as I usually do, because this has really affected me. And I have gotten to the point where I've made myself sick from anxiety, disgust, anger, all of those negative emotions. So yeah, Black Lives Matter, and I stand with the protests, and I hope you do too. I will not tolerate any sort of comments that are nasty, and I will remove them if you are going to make those type of comments like all lives matter and blue lives matter, or try to insult me for giving a damn about other people. So anyway, and we're back to our normal schedule. Also, this is why I can't talk about these things, because I get a little too emotional, and when I get too emotional it's really hard for me to talk straight. So I will move on to things I can talk about, which is the topic of the conversation. This video is probably about 2 years old. Well, the recording of the artwork here is about 2 years old, and it coincides with what I want to talk about really, really well, which is shortcuts. Artistic shortcuts. When is it and is not okay to use, and all that stuff. The reason I wanted to talk about this is that we have a bit of a toxic idea as an artistic community, and not everyone, but a good chunk of people have this misconception that using shortcuts and references is bad, and we should never use them. Like, no, that is so wrong on so many levels. But there are points where it isn't okay to use, or basically bad ways to use your references and shortcuts and stuff like that. And it's usually in regards to photo manipulation. It has less to do with things like what I do. I have a very stylistic style, and when I use references, I'm literally using them to get the base idea for something from that reference, and it's usually not the whole thing. If you'll notice with this picture, it's going to look drastically different from this photograph I found. Now, when is it bad to take a photograph that's not yours? And there's a bit of a blurred line on it. It's not necessarily a blurred line. It's more of, are you copying the thing you are referencing, or are you using it as a reference? Let me use an example of making your own style. Now, if you haven't learned how to make your own style, making your own style usually consists of taking things from other art, anything, usually from other artists and their style, and deciding, I like how they do this thing. And you kind of create a Frankenstein of several different styles to create your own style. My personal one, because my style has changed drastically over the years, and one of the recent changes I've done is me copying the way Drawing with Waffles does her noses. Does my art style look anything like Drawing with Waffles style? It does not. But I took how she makes her noses and I've applied it to my style because I like the way she does it, and my style has changed a lot since then, just from the nose in general. And I kind of have a very shorthand style. Like, I know how to break things down, I know how to make them look proper, but I still use shorthand when I draw, which is another form of shortcuts. And the more you draw, the more you learn, the more you understand how things are supposed to work, the more you can use shorthand or shortcuts within your own style. Back to the topic at hand with using reference photos. If you are doing a more realistic style, using photos is probably not going to help you as much. And here's my point on that. And this is probably why people got the misconception that using references is bad. It's not bad. It depends on what you're doing. When you're using reference photos, you lose the ability to really see the 3D space. You only get the impression of the 3D space because you're looking at a 2D image. The 2D image is of a 3D image. But like, say if you went into a 3D program, you can turn the thing around and really get a sense on how that thing is supposed to look at different angles. Same thing when you're drawing from real life. You can kind of turn your head and tilt it to get the full perspective. But when you're trying to learn from a photograph, from a 3D plane, it can be a little distorted when you're trying to replicate that. And it'll show. You'll notice a difference from when you look at things within a 3D space versus a 2D space when you're trying to make a more realistic picture. Now, when you're using reference in the way I'm using it here as like a stylistic thing, you'll notice I'm taking specific parts. And I'm like the tree, for example. I didn't even take the whole tree. I literally cut out a bunch of branches, but I wanted to understand how the branches worked, because I actually am really bad at doing branches. I also liked how the hill went. So you'll notice I kind of copied the hill. But in the photograph, it's an entire countryside. Whereas I changed the tree line to be literally like the entrance to a forest. Or something like that. The picture looks entirely different from the photo I took reference from. And this is kind of how I use references. I will take bits and pieces, kind of break them down so that I understand how they work better, and maybe I'll use it in the picture, maybe I'll just draw an entirely new picture based on my new knowledge, which if you looked at my February challenge video, you'll see how I did that in the start, where I was breaking down the characters' features so that it translated better into my style. And that's how you use reference correctly. When is it incorrect? When you're copying. Copying is only good for practice. It is never good for doing your finished picture that you want to show to everyone. Copying only takes you so far when you're learning. It's mainly best to get the muscle memory in your arm going on how to do the thing. It's the same thing with tracing, which is kind of what I do with the reference there, is to get a feel for it, is I am literally tracing these lines, but I'm not tracing all the lines, and I'm not copying everything, and I'm not trying to make this scene from this photograph. There's literally just a little bit of it from the photograph that I want, and then I'm adding things to it. So when I'm done with my reference, you can't recognize what I did. And you should always give credit to where you get your references from. Sadly, this is from Google search, and when I looked into where I found this image, it's Pinterest, and I hate Pinterest. It's like impossible to track down, once it's been in Pinterest, an image and where its source came from, because Google's always going to prioritize Pinterest, and Pinterest doesn't give you a link back to the original source. So yeah, that's just why I hate Pinterest. If I could exclude Pinterest in my search options, that would be great. I don't know how, and I wish I knew how. If you know how, please let me know down in the comments how I can exclude certain websites from my Google search, because that would be great. I would love that so much. Thank you. Anywho, the same thing with shortcuts. Shortcuts, when you don't know how to do something, or that's not the thing that you are passionate about. Like, for instance, I am a character illustrator. I like creating characters. I do like creating scenes, but landscapes are always going to be background to me. I'm not very good at making them look better than a background image. And when you're spending so much time on these, sometimes you get caught up in the details of the background, and it makes it really, really hard on you to do the rest of the image because you stress so much about making this one little piece look good, and it's like it's not looking the way you want it to look. This is where shortcuts come, and you'll see me use a bunch of shortcuts. Like, I will use like a stamping tool or spray that has like the shape of trees, and I will literally just throw them in the background. It came with my Clip Studio Paint. I'm gonna use it because that way I don't have to worry about making the trees look better. Same thing with the leaves. I use a foliage brush, which makes that effect, and I love the shading that it gives me on that image. And that's kind of it. The shortcuts, the references, this is all things meant to help you in the things that you're not as good at. And to be honest, it's not realistic to learn everything as an artist. Whereas we make it seem like you have to learn everything to be a legit artist, which that's just not fair. That is not fair to anyone to expect you to be good at everything. And it's taxing to learn, it's taxing to do if that's not what you do all the time. That's where you need the shortcuts. That's where you need the references. Give yourself a break. Stop being mean to yourself. So we are approaching the end of the video, so thank you all so much for watching. If you like what you saw, please hit that like button. Thank you very much. If you have any questions or comments, please lay them on me. I'd love to hear from you. If you'd like to support me, please check out my Patreon, my Discord, or my Ko-fi. Or if you'd like to support me in other ways, you can check out my social media. Links will all be down in the description below. And if you want to see more, subscribe. I promise you will see more. And I'll catch you in the next video. Later.